GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy has come under fire recently based on an allegation that he engaged in a pump and dump scheme during his time as a biotech CEO. Is there any merit to this claim, or is it a case of a political smear? In this video, we'll be doing a deep dive into the details to uncover the truth. The alleged pump and dump scheme relates to a company called Axovant Sciences Inc. Axovant was one of a number of subsidiaries of Roivant Sciences Inc., a company Vivek founded in 2014 after leaving his previous job as a partner at hedge fund QVT, where he co-managed the firm's biotech portfolio. Roivant's business model was simple: develop drugs that were languishing in the pipelines of other biotech companies, often due to mismanagement. Each acquired drug was housed in a subsidiary called a Vant. Now, some alleged journalists have referred to these Vants as shell companies, which just reveals that they have absolutely no clue what they're talking about. A shell company is an entity that has no operations or significant assets. There's nothing inherently improper about using a shell company, but in the past, they've been used for nefarious purposes, such as concealing schemes to receive tens of millions of dollars in bribes from foreign countries. However, in the case of Roivant, each of its subsidiaries functioned as its own fully operating business, with its own assets, management, employees, and infrastructure. This is standard operating procedure for companies that have multiple independent enterprises. For example, Johnson & Johnson has more than 275 unique subsidiaries. The enterprise of Axovant revolved around its ownership of an Alzheimer's drug called SB742457, which was later renamed RVT-101, and then Intepridine. Axovant purchased this drug from the pharmaceutical company GlaxoSmithKline. You may have heard the claim that Intepridine failed 4 clinical trials prior to Axovant's acquisition, and this is true. But this fact alone doesn't tell the whole story. To understand the full context, it's first important to know how drugs are developed. This developmental process typically spans the course of many years, with the most critical stage being its clinical trials. There are 3 clinical trial stages that a drug is required to pass to be approved for marketing by the FDA. Phase 1 focuses on testing the safety of the drug on humans. Phase 2 focuses on testing the effectiveness of the drug, and Phase 3 focuses on confirming the drug's efficacy compared to other available treatments. In total, GSK conducted 13 clinical trials on Intepridine, and the 4 that failed occurred during Phase 2. So this raises the question: why would GSK conduct multiple Phase 2 trials after the first one failed? Well, when a clinical trial fails, it doesn't mean that the drug has no use. It simply means that the drug failed to meet its stated objectives, also known as its primary endpoints, based on the specific design of that trial. A new design can be developed that either changes the treatment, for example by altering the dose or pairing it with other drugs, or by modifying the primary endpoints. In the case of Intepridine, its first Phase 2 trial tested the efficacy of the drug alone as a monotherapy, which did not indicate significant improvement in cognition or function. However, by the 4th trial, where Intepridine was administered in conjunction with another drug, the results did show significant improvements in cognition. So why was it then deemed a failure? Well, this goes back to the primary endpoints that were designated by the design of that specific trial, which measured the efficacy of the drug over a 48-week period across multiple different tests, most notably ADAS, ADCS, and CDR. On the ADAS test, the treatment resulted in significant improvements in cognition relative to a placebo at weeks 12, 24, and 48, but not 36. The ADCS test showed improvements during weeks 12 to 36, but not 48. And the CDR test showed improvement during week 12 only. Axovant identified an opportunity for further development of the drug based on what it perceived to be certain flaws in that trial. For one, no Alzheimer's drugs had ever been approved with CDR as a primary endpoint. Other Alzheimer's drugs had been approved using ADAS and ADCS as the primary endpoints and based on a shorter trial period. Additionally, Axovant conducted a reanalysis of GSK's data using two different statistical methods, both of which showed significant improvements across both ADAS and ADCS through 48 weeks. So on this basis, Axovant acquired Interberdine with the goal of launching a newly designed phase 3 trial over 24 weeks using these two tests as the primary endpoints. Most have reported that the purchase price for Interberdine was $5 million, which isn't exactly accurate. In addition to the upfront $5 million payment, as part of the deal, GSK was also entitled to receive up to $160 million more if certain hurdles were met, as well as a 12.5% royalty fee on net sales. We can infer from this that GSK believed that Interberdine still had some potential despite its 4 failed trials. If GSK believed that the drug was valueless, it wouldn't have made sense for them to agree to back-end payments contingent upon Interberdine's success. Instead, they would have asked for a larger payment up front. After acquiring Interberdine, in March of 2015, Axovant met with the FDA to share its findings and plans, and the FDA confirmed that no additional studies were required to initiate Axovant's phase 3 testing. So a couple months later, Axovant launched a $315 million IPO to fund further development. Over the next few years, Axovant would go on to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in their effort to bring Interberdine to market, but ultimately, in September of 2017, the drug failed its phase 3 trial, as nearly 99% of Alzheimer's drugs do, which was a risk that the public was clearly warned of from the very beginning in Axovant's offering documents, and as a result, its stock price plummeted. So the million-dollar question is, did Vivek profit off this enterprise? Some have pointed to the fact that he reported $37 million in capital gains in 2015 as definitive proof of a pump-and-dump scheme. The claim is that Vivek artificially elevated Axovant's stock price through deceptive practices, only to cash out and enrich himself before the bottom fell out. However, while it is true that Vivek sold some stock in 2015, shortly after Axovant's IPO, these weren't shares of Axovant. They were shares of Roivant. And these shares weren't sold to some grannies in a retirement home. They were sold to Viking Global Investors, a $59 billion hedge fund who would go on to make multiple additional investments in Roivant and currently owns almost 10% of the company. By definition, a pump and dump cannot occur if the stock price goes up after you sell the shares. And although the purchase price Viking paid is not known, most likely it was based on a valuation that was many times lower than Roivant's valuation when it launched its $7 billion IPO in 2021. And having developed 6 FDA-approved medicines to date, with many more in the pipeline, Roivant's stock has continued to climb since then, with the company now valued at over $9 billion. So whatever happened to the Axovant shares that Vivek and Roivant owned? Well, between the IPO in 2015 and the stock's crash in 2017, neither Vivek nor Roivant sold a single share. And this is despite the fact that at its peak, Axovant's shares reached a high of $200. At this price, Roivant's holdings would have been valued at $15 billion, and Vivek's holdings would have been valued at $71 million. Yet neither of them ever cashed out, which you would think that Vivek would have done if he didn't believe in Interberdine and had an ulterior motive to fleece investors. So while it is true that Axovant did end up sinking, ultimately the captain went down with the ship.